Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Miss Texas Show with your co-host, Melissa Santana. I feel like my voice was a little hoarse right there. Sorry, y'all. But as always, super excited to have you with us and super excited to have another wonderful guest. Today's guest is the co-author of 10 books, but has also launched a solo book in July of 2020, is also involved in psychotherapy, hypnotherapy, yoga, among so many other things, and is also an activist. So I am super excited and I can't wait for you to meet them. So let's get into it and I hope you enjoy.
The Ms. Texas Show is a voice of hope for victims, survivors, advocates, and community leaders against gender-based violence to share their stories and resources. We began showcasing life in Texas. Today, we are impacting lives not only in Texas, but also around the world. Under our segment Military Time, we run this segment in partnership with the National Veterans Chamber of Commerce. We invite military and veterans who have overcome traumatic events to share their experiences during and after their military service. Under our beauty segment, we invite fellow pageant winners and contestants, artists, musicians, actors, models, and dancers, and last but not least, our survivor leaders from family violence, sex trafficking, sexual assault, stalking, and other traumatic events, who are ambassadors for these causes to share their lives and the impact they have made. To become a guest on our show, email us at msusatexas@gmail.com. If you would like to support victims and survivors of gender-based violence, make a tax-deductible donation to Hope Picks Global at www.hopeyxglobal.org.
Welcome once again, everyone, to another edition of the Miss Texas Show. Excited as always, your co-host, Melissa Santana, not only to introduce you to the show, but introduce you to another wonderful guest. And so today we definitely have the honor and pleasure of having Jaswinder Challi, or Challi to the show. And so I am super excited to have her with us. And I want to be able to tell you a little bit more about her and all the great things she's done. She is not only the co-author of 10 books, but is also working on her solo book, which is launching later on this year in time for the International Book Awards. She has also written articles for magazines. She ran one during her 20s called Cultures. Her chapters are all based on survival through challenges and overcoming them. She is a psychotherapist, hypnotherapist, shamanic practitioner, and yogi. She's working in a transpersonal modality. I can't wait to hear more about that. She is also an activist in areas of oppression and has been invited to speak on interviews and numerous conferences. And we also get the pleasure of having her with us today and being able to speak on the Miss Texas Show, which I'm super excited about. And so what I would love, if you do not mind, since this is viewers' first opportunity to meet you, if you could just tell us just a little bit more about yourself, who you are, you know, a little bit about what got you here today and just all of those wonderful things.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you so much for inviting me on this lovely show and giving me the opportunity to express myself and, you know, use my voice for things that are important. And I also want to thank the viewers that will tune in to listen. Right, so I am Indian born. I was actually born in India. I came over with my mum when I was around 18 months old. So I was still very young. So I had all my schooling here in the UK. My father had come over while my mum was still pregnant, and he came to do our paperwork and make application for us to come and join him. Now, recently I have this book that I'm writing, my solo book, has taken me time because it actually activated and started to unblock, because I'm a psychotherapist myself. It started to unlock things inside me, which I was just not aware of. So it sent me on this journey of deep investigation about my past, about my history, about my roots, about my parents. And I'm glad that it did, because it's been an enormous healing journey, very insightful, and it's made my work to, it's made my determination stronger to do more work in this field, much, much stronger. And part of what happened was, while when I started writing the book, um, I actually had an opportunity that came in my way for an honorary scholarship for a doctorate. And I chose to do that in transpersonal psychology and spirituality, but my focus was on mental health, to do with the marginalized, low caste people in India, because my investigation had led me to understand that that's where we came from. So I don't know, people that have seen the film Slumdog Millionaire, have you seen it? Slumdog Millionaire?
I actually have not.
All right, okay. Well, it's a Hollywood film. It was a big hit,
Mm.
really, really like big hit. But that movie focuses on, like the dreams and aspirations of these people that are just basically living in such poverty and really oppressed situations, and economic hardship, but how you get, how the girls get abducted and trafficked, and the boys get put into forced labor, and all of that. So and this is what my book is all about, really, because it's the theme is oppression, and I've had a journey of real oppression from all angles you can think of. I had it growing up, the whole cultural thing. I felt it was because growing up in the UK, maybe if I was growing up in India, I probably wouldn't have felt the way I felt growing up in Britain, because I had a very, westernized kind of culture around me at school. And then the Asian cultural side of it felt very, not, I wouldn't say everything, but some parts of it were oppressive. And for a long time, I felt, sort of all sorts of emotions about it towards my parents. But the recent research that I did brought out enormous empathy for my parents, because it made me realize why they were like that, because of their own conditioning. They were child laborers in India, working for, people, the kind of like upper caste communities. And my parents were very oppressed, and the research that I've been doing has shown me just um, how much there is this inequality of power and powerlessness. So the oppressor has the power, the oppressed have no power. The oppressor has all the privileges, the oppressed have no privileges. The oppressor has all the control, the oppressed has no control. So all this imbalance and all these inequalities is kind of like what I came from, my roots. And that actually, made sense, because when I was growing up back in the 70s, I because I grew up with quite a big Caribbean community as well. And back in the 70s, I saw this series that went on for weeks, called Roots. And I couldn't understand why I was so connected to that, even more so than some of my Caribbean friends. And when I kind of I revisited that series recently, Roots, and I then kind of like realized why I had connected so deeply. It was because of the same suffering, the same trials, the same oppression. There's just so much similarity, and that is why on an empathic level, I could understand when I was watching, the series, I could understand that suffering. I could really resonate with it. The whole oppression, the violence, the family breakup, the grief, the trauma, all of that. I could really connect with it and identify with it. But at that time, I didn't know why. It's only recently when my research led me into, investigating all of this on a much deeper level, that I really began to understand. I mean, the book itself, I wasn't sure, that this was the book I was going to write. There's kind of like a whole spiritual sort of meaning behind all this, because what I thought I was going to write was like an autobiography of my life, something like that, or memoirs of my life. And what happened was I was led, but I had this mystical experience, and I was led to another mystical experience, and I was given a revelation by, the spiritual beings, that I had to write this book. And at first I was resisting. I was saying, no, I want to write my own book. I don't want to write this book. And, I was being told, it was like I was being commanded that I had to write this book. It was like a spiritual command that was like given to me. And so even after that, for some time, I just, I tried to brush it aside and didn't place much emphasis on it, because I kind of was in two minds. I kept thinking, I'm supposed to be writing my own biography or something like that. But then what happened was I had an injury that affected my pelvis and my balance and everything. And then I had to look deeper into that. And when I started to look deeper into that, it all began to make sense. It was almost like the jigsaw puzzle started to come together, and it all started to make sense. I realized then why that accident happened and why I had to write that book, and everything was coming together. And it was almost like then I was being channeled the information of what I needed to write. It was just being given to me. So I started to write the book. The book is kind of written. The first draft is kind of done. But as I said, the doctorate for the mental health came my way, and then I had to put the book on hold and do that. I've just completed that now. And so I have to make a trip abroad, and then when I come back, I want to finalize the book and sort of like, get it out there. The cover's done, the first draft is done, and it's just tweaking it and getting things in order more than anything. But the main sort of bulk of the book is already done and it's written. Yeah.
Which is awesome. And I'm glad, because I mean, it's definitely not an easy thing to have to like look and process all of those things in general, let alone when you're also trying to write them sequentially in a way for others to understand, and then, and appeal to like a wide audience. So there's a lot of steps, I feel, that I think not everyone understands when it comes to writing a book. It's just not that simple as just sitting down and getting it all done. Exactly. No. Like there is a tremendous process. So for you to even be this further along, and it is amazing. I definitely think it's so good to know that you are close to the finish line, but also that you're touching on such an important topic. So I think, and I think the great, one of the most fascinating things you said was that you got that message, what I mean, that mystical message, but also that you couldn't ignore. And so that's the funny thing, right? Like when the universe speaks to us that we can't, I mean, we can try, but then, accidents can happen. And so, or like
Yeah.
other things can occur. So definitely like if there is a message out there for us, like the universe is going to find a way. It's up to us whether or not, like I said, we'll heed to that message, but it's definitely there for a reason, and it's there to, set us on our path. And so with that, I'm curious, like, having heard that you did endure all of that, and that there's a lot that clearly you have overcome, and it's like amazing because now you're like this co-author and you've done all these amazing things. I'm wondering if we look at like taking a step back and like, so what does that mean that life was typically like for you when you were growing up? Like, what was life like for you back then? What kind of feelings did you have that maybe, like you said, now you're starting to understand, but like, what was life like back then for Jaswinder?
Well, during school life, it was fun at school. I loved school. And a lot of kids don't like school, but I loved school. For me, school was a social arena to meet up with all my friends and, have chit chat um, uh, and it was just like an escapism, I suppose, away from home. Because at home, um, because of the poverty my parents came from, they had one thing, obviously that there was this tunnel vision. We have to work and earn the money quickly. We have to work and earn the money. So they were putting in so many hours of overtime and doing more than one job. So they were most of the time out at work. I was the oldest girl, so a lot of the responsibility fell on me of the household chores and cooking, this, that. And and my dad was very strict. He was extremely strict, mainly on me because I was the oldest girl. And he knew that if he was strict on me, that he could get the work done. So, yeah, so I had a lot to I had these big burdens to shoulder from a very early age. It was almost like I didn't really have a childhood, not a proper one, because there was always like chores, work. But then having said that, there was also a lot of fun as well because it was like first generation Asians came over. There was a lot of interaction between them, a lot more love than I see these days. Um, and because everybody was in the same boat. And so there was this whole feel of community and togetherness as well. And there was, when my parents did have time off, like some of the weekends, there was always like huge parties, loads of visitors. Everybody was, these get-togethers. So it was almost like there was these two lives at home as well. On the one hand, when my parents were away at work, life was really difficult. I was on the go all the time. There was work, 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 work. But then there was this other side of it that was really fun and exciting as well. And also, there was a period when my father uh, was inviting his guru over, and the community would gather in our house because there was no temples at that time, no gurdwara. So my dad had dedicated the whole of the upstairs and made it into a temple. And so that was another fun and exciting thing because people would come and get married in our house. And, so it was just, yeah, there was these two sides of things, and it's really strange because I had two names. Jaswinder is my legal name, my official legal name, but I had another nickname that I grew up with within the community, and many people didn't even know I had a name Jaswinder, because they just knew me as this other nickname people called me. So it was really strange that I had two names, two lives, and there was some parts of it I found very oppressive. Now there were certain things like, I would look at some of the British girls and see the freedom they had and see the privileges they had, and it would make me think about the unfairness of it all, because they could have lots of different clothes, matching things, and they wouldn't think twice about it. I had to kind of like wear the same clothes until I grew out of them. I wasn't allowed to, like my parents were not just thinking about themselves and our main family, they were thinking about their relatives back in India who were still struggling. So they were sending them money back and making sure they could buy land, etc., so that they could have food, So it was like saving every penny that they possibly could. And then when I left, I remember when I left school, I used to work in this county hotel in the kitchen with my mum. In fact, I started while I was still at school. I was a teenager. And to this day, I remember very clearly because I go for walks along the river there and I see that hotel all the time. And every time I see this hotel, it reminds me of the days when I used to work there with my mum, and there were many other Asian women. We'd work in the kitchen doing washing up, and we'd have to carry these large crates of plates and cutlery and glasses and move them around, etc. But the interesting thing was we were paid like next to nothing because there was no law about minimum wage in those days. So it was almost like slave labor. We worked hours and hours and we were hardly paid anything. And what I used to look at these English people, and they would spend money in one evening that would take me like a week to 2 weeks to earn. And they would spend that in one night. And I remember saying to myself, in my mind and sometimes out loud, wow, I wish I could be in their shoes. I wish I could have that luxury. I wish I could go out for a meal like that and not have to worry about money, So things, I grew up, what the point I'm trying to make is I grew up with a lot of scarcity. Financially, there was a lot of scarcity. Everything was to the minimum. There was no wastage of anything. We had to be very resourceful with everything. And, everything was very, very minimum, very minimum. But it was hard work, very, very hard work. And my parents come from a community, a culture where back in India, it's very unsafe to keep a young woman at home. So they would marry the girls off very, very early. And so that was part of their conditioning, because my parents got married very young. And in India, it's a place where young girls get abducted. They get abducted and sold into sex trades and become sex slaves. And they're all from the lower end communities that I come from. So when I left school, I was working with my mum for about a year, and then my dad and the men, so the patriarchal force of the family and community, forced me into this marriage. I was trying to say that I wanted to study, I wanted to go to college, I didn't want to get married, and I was just told basically it wasn't my choice. It wasn't up to me. I had nothing to do with it. I just had to go through the process. And I was very upset, very, very upset. My mum knows, I cried for days, and but she felt against the patriarchy, she couldn't do anything. So, it was kind of like a helplessness. And so I got married. I had only just turned 17. It was a few days after my 17th birthday. And back in those days, there were because we were the first, because, things were new, these kind of practices were new in the UK, there weren't any laws like there are now. So a lot of things were going on, a lot of practices were going on, like taking children out of school and taking them abroad and getting them married, or just, even here. So I had to get married, and And then I ended up as a servitude slave within the family. I lost my voice. I had no voice. I wasn't allowed to, basically it was like, just do as you're told. You, you know, I felt like a robot. I wasn't allowed to have a mind, have a voice, nothing. And it was almost like my energies turned inwards, and I began to self-harm because the pain was just too bad, too much. I couldn't share what I was going through with anybody. Now, there was a conditioning, obviously, with the parents, like, you marry the girl off and she doesn't come back home. And in those days, divorce wasn't even a thing. It wasn't heard of, in the Asian community. It wasn't a thing that was happening in the Asian community. So it wasn't even in my awareness that there was such a thing as separation or divorce. So I was just doing as I was told, and but I was just kind of dying every day, basically. And so by day, I was a slave to, obviously, the mother-in-law. She had me working as a machinist, and I would be stitching these clothes all day long, in between cooking dinner, cleaning the house. And I would only get a few hours sleep, but in those few hours, what was happening at night? Obviously I was being assaulted. My body wasn't mine, So it was like I was in a hell, basically. And again, maybe I'm close to spirit somehow, because after 1 year of putting up with that, I kind of was saved. My parents were going to go to India. They had come, and they were just down the road at my uncle's, and they were going to come and see me the next day. But there was something that happened that escalated, and it enabled my parents to bring me back home when they witnessed what was going on. So yeah, it was difficult. It was very hard. And then when I came back home, I was ill for a while. I was still self-harming for a while, and things were tough. But when I picked myself back up, this time, like my parents, they were very lenient. They let me study, and they let me do things. But then they got caught up in the, cultural stuff again, that you can't keep your daughter at home. She has to get married. And so it was back to square one. It was almost like another attempt, just as bad, in a different way, And I was just not treated as like a human being, really. So this time, again, the scarcity, the poverty, no money, nothing. I remember I kind of like went hungry for a few days. There was no money, no food, and I ended up with this marriage. I ended up pregnant. I ended up having a baby. And I kind of like, as much as I was so close to wanting to just end it all, I had to think about my child. And that became my survival key, having to live for somebody else that needed me. That started to make me stronger. And I made the decision to walk away from that marriage and to make it on my own. And the pain, you know, even when I kind of separated on my own, then I was ostracized by everybody. I was completely on my own, completely. And that in itself was hard because it was very traumatic. It was very painful, extremely painful. And as much as I wanted to, you know, just end it all, I was having these, you know, conversations with God. And that's when I had my first mystical experience. Well, I would say the first big one that I was actually aware of properly and understood what it was about, because I'd had kind of like previous ones before, but I was too young. So this was like a big one. And that is the night my life turned around and it changed. And I embarked on a journey of study. That's why I became a therapist. I began to counsel women who were abused. So I've been in this, you know, kind of like field of work in the area of abuse for a very long time. And I supported and helped women that had, you know, I thought my journey was bad, but when I heard the stories of so many other women who had been through horrendous torture and all sorts of, you know, horrible experiences, it was almost like I was shown that I'm not alone, even though I felt so alone. You know, I wasn't, and that I wasn't the only one suffering in such a way, that there was, you know, so many people were suffering. So I have gone, you know, from being like initially started out as a counselor, and then I just carried on going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And so that then has brought me, you know, just at the start of COVID, into doing like co-author books, and it's almost like sharing my message in a different way, what I went through, and with a view to help other people so that they don't feel alone like I did, so that they can read and maybe find some hope, find some direction, find some inspiration that can help and support them.
Absolutely. And I just think, thank you so much for sharing. But like, it just, you could literally even see, like when you go back to those moments, how like that still creates such a real, you know, like real emotions for all of us. I mean, I felt them as you're speaking, and I can like feel them, you know, with you. But it's just like incredible, like how those really do shape us, like our childhoods really do, because I could literally like see you back there as a child, you know, like not only as a child, but then also as a young woman, and like being stripped of any opportunity to just, you know, be an individual and just find out who you were, and just you didn't even get that chance. It's like forget who you are and like what your interests are. You were never
Mm,
asked. You were never asked. Like from the beginning, it was just this is what your path
mm,
is going to be. This is what we need you to
yeah.
do. And as a result, you know, we just go ahead and deal with it. Like I mean, find a way. And unfortunately for you, oh, to have gotten in that moment where, you know, eventually you found yourself self-harming, is just you never want that to be anyone's experience where they feel that they don't have any other options. You never want that.
Mm,
But I can totally understand why you did though. I mean, just because like you have literally no one else to turn to, and you know, and you have parents. So this is the incredible thing. We also hear from people who have broken homes and they don't even have access to their parents, or maybe it is the mom that went away, maybe it's the dad, or you know, whatever like that. And what's interesting is your parents weren't necessarily the ones inflicting at least physical abuse, like at least physically.
no.
Like they weren't the ones, you know, right. They weren't necessarily doing that. But by being like, but by adhering so strictly to those cultural values, they weren't realizing the emotional harm that they were then doing to you, and that mental, like toll that it was taking on you by having to adhere to that. Because I get what they were doing, of course, for them, this is what we've been doing, this is what we grew up on. It would actually be disrespectful not to do this. Why would we be the only family that doesn't do what we're supposed to be doing? So like, totally understandable. But for you, you wanted to be able to just be able to live your life, be able to choose your partner. What a novel concept, but just like simple things. And it's just incredible to me that, I'm positive they felt that they were doing the right thing, of course. And they were like almost killing themselves with all the work that they were doing. I mean, my goodness.
Yeah.
So it's not like they did not care. I get that, but it was so misplaced. Like it was just in a way where unfortunately it wasn't to your benefit. And for them, and then for you to have almost gotten saved, kind of like it was like a almost saved, but then just to go right back into it. I mean, my goodness, it's like I almost feel like, oh, great, like they finally saw that, like, okay, well, maybe even though this is what we have to do, if it's causing our daughter this much harm, then maybe we should reconsider. And it's like they almost did for a minute, but then the weight of those cultural values outweighed that, and they just went right back. So it's just, oh Lord, it was like a lot to take in. And but that's me as as a witness. So, you know what I mean? I'm not the one that lived your life. So it's just, I can literally only imagine the weight of that. And then, like you said, I understand that now as a therapist, you hear from so many others. And like you said, they lived even more. But I think that I just want to make sure that we don't, it definitely doesn't want to minimize what you went through, because that was incredible though. And I mean, I can only imagine, like, like I said, especially the forced marriage part, how, horrendous that is, because you're literally being forced to marry and like live a life with someone that you didn't even choose. Like literally, you had no autonomy over that. You had no, say so over that. And like you said, as a result, you are absolutely being assaulted. And I'm glad like you've come to the realization that, you understand that. But for others who have not done that, they're probably still thinking, no, I mean, I'm honoring my family. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. So like, if anything, they're like internalizing it, and they're, thinking that they're doing the right thing. But it's just incredible to know that, no, I mean, you are, this isn't fair to you. And if you didn't have any choice in it, then it is abuse. I mean, it is. And then, and like I said, for that abuse to then turn into that. So I just think it's incredible, that you're here now, and, the incredible work you do. I think it's amazing. And I'm so glad we have it. And I'm glad you made that transition, because that's what I was going to ask about next, about therapy work. But I just had to emphasize, like, that was an incredible journey that you went through. I think it definitely makes you so empathetic to others. And like, I can totally see why it's a benefit and such a strength in your therapy work. But wow, like, I just, thank you for sharing that, but also just like highlighting something that we do not get a chance to talk about in our society, but definitely on the show. I haven't had the chance to talk about forced labor, forced marriages. So I'm just glad that you're giving us that opportunity to have that conversation that many others don't realize and maybe had any education or awareness on. So I appreciate that. But with that being said, I was going to ask that. I really wanted to know. And it's interesting because when it comes to spirituality, you, like you said, you live this like duality of a life. Like you kind of have these like, different identities, literally with two different names.
Yeah.
I remember you, right? Which was, very interesting. I'm like, oh, that is interesting. It's like, like double. And I didn't forget that you also mentioned that your father, he had the temple. So that's super interesting. And he was kind of like, almost this like, pillar for the, for the community, because people would come to get married. So I think I was wondering like, where were your connections to spirituality, and where they began, because it's clearly deep now. I mean, the fact that you're even able to get these kind of messages, I mean, you have to be pretty, I feel like not everybody gets that. And actually others may be getting them, but they don't know how to listen for those messages.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's kind of almost blocked, like we kind of block our own, like avenues to those messages. We probably all can hear them if we allow ourselves to. And so for you to now be in this area where you're able to do that, I was definitely curious, like, and I was wondering, if that was something that was like a saving grace, but you mentioned it too. Your child was actually one of your saving graces as well. So yeah, it definitely was, it's clear that you've been protected, like divinely protected, but it's also like, definitely like the child also helped. So I'm definitely curious about that, like more about like your spirituality, how it goes, because for you to be a psychotherapist, but also hypnotherapist, I know that there's definitely a lot of like spirituality there. I mean, you mentioned it, you're a yogi as well. So I'm definitely curious about like how you got to that, how that has served you, how you use it, all of those things.
Yeah, sure. I think the spirituality started actually in India before we came to England, because my mum, she tells me very clearly that she lost her first two children in India because, as I said, they were a lot of poverty. They had no money, and then I got ill, and she said that she was really panicking and she was worried. She'd also lost two children before. I do have an older brother, um, and there was two children first, then my older brother, then me. So she said that at the same time, her cousin, his son, also got ill, and they were both worried and they didn't know what to do. So my mum said that she went to go and see this, um, like an energy healer type shaman in India. And she said that what he did was he put on a fire. He put some herbs on this fire and he did some prayers. Obviously, he was talking to the spirits because he was a shaman. And he kind of like did this hole in my ear. Don't know if you can see there, but it's actually in the actual, this lobe thing is actually in the middle. It's on some kind of meridian line.
Oh, wow.
And my mom said that at first she thought I had died because I just went unconscious. And she said that she, had given up. She thought I died. And then she said, like, when she was back at the village, she said that I started to regain consciousness, and and I think what happened to me, Melissa, that time, I think is I had a near-death experience. Yeah, because the fact that I can hear spirit, and it's interesting that that hole is made there on my ear because I hear spirit. Okay. Because I remember as a young child when sometimes, I would do all the housework that my parents needed doing. And just as my break, I used to go to this park area. They've built a school there now, unfortunately, but when I was growing up, it was all greenery, lots of trees, lots of grass, and I used to go and play there on my own. I used to love picking, like those little daisies and buttercups, and I would talk to the trees, and I would weave the trees, because we used to plait our hair growing up, and I used to plait my sister's hairs for when they went to school. And so I used to plait the weeping willow trees. I used to plait them, and I used to talk to them. And I kind of didn't realize what I was doing was talking to the spirits of nature. So I actually grew up doing that. I mean, at the time, it was just a natural process. I didn't really, I just thought it was an escapism away from home. It was, taking me into this kind of imaginary world, but it was connecting to nature, and nature is spirit. And I didn't realize that's what I was doing, but I was doing it intuitively. It was almost like I was guided to go there. Then my parents, the guru who used to come, I used to love the kirtans, where they used to do the mantra chanting. And I would sit by the guru, and when the elders would talk about, spiritual things, I would sit there and listen intently. I was always so, it was almost like I couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough of it. It was like I had this hunger. And so I kind of knew a lot about spirituality from quite a young age. And that's why I could see what is wrong and why it's wrong. I saw domestic abuse being wrong from a very early age. I just felt powerless because of you know, the cultural conditioning where they all stuck together, and and I was just a child. So I knew growing up things that I saw around me that were not right. I mean, like at school, I saw the imbalance of, like how me and some children where we didn't have much and other children did. They had a lot. So, you know, there was that inequality. And then I saw the inequality even, you know, locally in our community where there was domestic abuse. It used to hurt me, but I felt powerless. I couldn't do anything about it. I didn't know what to do, but I knew it was not right. So when I was in this forced marriage, I knew it was wrong. I could see these people acting like robots. They were just coming out of their conditioned selves, too scared, too frightened to rock the boat and say anything out of line to anybody. They were all following these rules, regulations, belief systems that they had been all conditioned to do. I just didn't know how to do anything about it. And I felt powerless, really powerless, but I just knew it was all wrong. And, you know, even in the second marriage, I knew that what was happening to me was not right. I knew what, you know, my husband, that husband, the way he was treating me was not right. He thought being an Asian man, because Asian men, their conditioning, a lot of it was like they can do anything, but the woman stays at home, and the woman, she does as she's told. So he was out having the time of his life, seeing other women and treating me like I was nothing, basically. Not working, not bringing any money in, and I was just left, you know, to try and make ends meet, to try and eat. And even when I would try and find work, he'd do something to disrupt it, you know, take it away from. So there was this whole control thing, real control thing. It was like, damned if I do, damned if I don't. It was that kind of thing. And on a soul level, I knew that I needed to get away from it. But my mind, the conditioning was, I was in this battle, was saying, everybody's going to go against you. Nobody, you know, all the other girls are staying quiet, they're staying put. Why are you doing it? Do you see what I mean? And that's exactly what happened. When I followed my soul, my heart, and I made that decision, I was left on my own. Everybody did turn their back on me. The women that I would see from the community, like in shopping or something, the few that often did talk to me, it was a way of telling me off, like, why do you feel you're different, that you had to leave your husband? What woman leaves their husband? It was that kind of telling off. And it was kind of like, you know, you ruined your parents' reputation. You know, all the women stay put. You have to listen to your in-laws. You have to listen to your husband. You know, women don't just go off and do their own. It was that kind of thing. It was almost like I was the one who was in the wrong. I was the one to blame. I had made the wrong decision. It was like, yeah, it was like, it was just all my fault. And it was really isolating, extremely isolating, because there was not one person that I could reach out to and say, help me. Not one person. And this is where then my spirituality and my divinity got stronger, because that's all I had left. Everything else was taken away from me. That's all I had left. And that's what I turned to. And when I turned back to that, I had that amazing mystical experience where I was shown, you know, a purpose, what I had to do. And I kind of like, it was like this journey, this synchronizing of events started to happen, and this journey started to unfold. But I just took each day as it came, you know, and it was difficult because, you know, I was trying to cope with my own life, and I was trying to cope with the lives of my clients. It wasn't easy. So I was holding space for myself. I was holding space for my clients. It was very difficult. It was kind of like but it was almost like this higher power was keeping me going, and I could feel it, and I was being directed every time. It was like I was being directed. Even now, I just continue to get directed. So I spend time talking to spirit. I spend time in meditation. I feel ancestors are very, very important. They guide me quite a lot. And I've had a really strong mystical experience to do with Jesus. And that's really precious and powerful. And when I look at the life of Jesus, he was oppressed from every direction. There was this oppression. It started even before he was born. Even before he was born, people were making plans on how to oppress him. So when I was given this calling and directed towards receiving this revelation and this command that I had to write this book, I was shown at that time also how God had spoken to Moses when he was given the command. He had to lead the people out of Israel, out of Egypt, and free those slaves. And so, I was told that I had to write this book, and I've been directed in how to write it. So let's see what happens, but spirituality has been a saving grace. And I do believe that there is a higher power. And I don't believe that, this is why I kind of don't believe I don't believe one religion has got all the answers. I believe that different religions give us different things. And it's not about being, in a boxed religion. It's the consciousness, and that consciousness can come from anywhere. That conscious, it can be any enlightened being. And, that is the true spirituality, when you follow your path, when you're guided by that consciousness of your purpose, your direction, what you have to do. I look back now and I realize why I went through some of those experiences and how I was saved every time. And I was saved every time because I think the divine plan was always there, that I would help other people, that I would become a therapist, that I would write books, because this solo book I'm writing is not going to be my first and last. I've already been given details for the one after that. So, there is more to come. And, there are, such wonderful, wonderful quotes within religions that we can, make, use in our lives and make our lives very enriched and powerful. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot there, I know, and it's very deep. And
So
but I kind of, I suppose, now I'm kind of helping people and guiding people.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, and I think too, and I was just gonna add, and like you said, the fact that you are already getting the messages about your next book and just all of that, it's definitely you've already been in a divine path, and I just think it's not going to end now. You know what I mean? I think if anything, it's going to get strengthened because, you know, you're listening to, you are walking in your purpose and what it is that you were meant to, you know, be here for. And yes, you did have a near death experience, like you said, but I mean, near death, you did not die for a reason because you're meant to be here. You clearly need, you know, there's work to be done, and you're
Yeah.
the best person to do it. So I think like it's just amazing that, you know, now you're doing it in this wonderful, like transmodal way, you know what I mean? And just, you know, like we're all responding to those, you know, wonderful messages that you're receiving and just, you know, doing it intentionally and, you know, absolutely. So I think I definitely, you know, can't wait for your book because I definitely think it's going to be an amazing one. And obviously it's, you're going to have more behind it, you know, like you said. So there will definitely be that, but I can only see that like with all of this, like, you know, wonderful experience that you have and like this wealth of knowledge, like I can see why you are a tremendous therapist as well, and like why you literally can help, you know, that you probably already have, but like how you have that ability to be able to help others as well. Like you do it in such a, you know, gentle, welcoming, but also like from an empathetic way. And it's just, it's what we need, you know, when we're seeking that kind of assistance, we need it to come from that kind of place. And you know what it was like when you didn't get that kind of assistance. So it's just amazing that now you're providing that, the assistance that you might not have been always able to get, but like now you're providing it for others as well. So I just think, like I said, it's amazing work. And I just think like, you know, there's a lot that, you know, you're going to be able to do, but that I'm looking forward to seeing. But like, wow. And actually with that, I mean, I could actually talk to you like more, but I want to also give you the opportunity if, you know, if this has resonated with anyone, if anybody wants to connect with you, how they can find you, how they can support the book when it does come out. I'm just, you know, want to give you space for that also.
Sure. Well, my name is Jaswinder Challi, so you can Google that and find me on Facebook, on Instagram. I also have a website, jazzneuro.com. But if you put in my name in Google, Jaswinder Challi, it will bring all those sites up anyway. So there's lots of different ways that I can be contacted. Yeah.
Beautiful. And then when the book, and so of course, when the book does come out, you'll probably put it on your website and all that, all those wonderful things.
Yeah, yeah. And
Absolutely.
also Amazon author, the Amazon site for, yeah.
Oh, for all those as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. So it has definitely been nothing short of an honor and pleasure. But is there anything else you want to tell viewers? Any other, you know, messages that you had on your heart or spirit? I'm just, you know, want to give you space for that also.
Well, I just want to tell anybody that's maybe going through a very hard and difficult time to put their hand on their heart and feel their heart and breathe, because breath connects everything. A lot of people, when they're panicking or they're distressed, they start holding the breath, and that starts to block everything. But I want to tell everyone, even if you're having a bad day, put your hand on your heart and focus on your breath. Feel that breath and start to feel that breath deeply going into your body, into through the lungs, into every part of your body, and then slowly exhale. That will start to just help you to balance everything, everything.
Absolutely. And I think too, we don't think enough about how important that is with something like breathing, which we do often. We have to do it actually all the time. It's a sign that we are alive, but how to actually use that and channel that. Ooh, it's something that I'm thinking about. I was over here thinking about myself. I need to remind myself to do that. So like I
I just
appreciate,
want to, yeah, I just want to
yeah.
add, because breath is the life force,
Mm.
and life force is what keeps us going, it's what gives us energy. If you can increase that energy, increase that life force, it will give you the will to fight whatever comes your way.
Mm. Oh my goodness, that's a word. And with that, I'm not going to ruin it. So you all heard it here. That was just a little nugget that you'll get if you connect with Jaswinder Challi. So like, as you heard, this is a reason to go ahead and Google her, connect, get on the website, all of those wonderful things. Amazon, you can find her on Amazon. So like literally there's no excuse. Like there's a way to find you. So like the good thing is I hope individuals do tap in, do connect with you, but also I want you to know how much of a pleasure it has been to learn from you, to really just just, I mean, I felt a little bit of growth myself, just hearing, like, reminding myself where I've been also, like, in your story, and just, and just how wonderful it is for all those who will get the opportunity to interact with you and all of that. So just thank you, for being you, but also for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you all.
Yes. Thank you.